Baseball fans, it is time once again for another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. With over 50 years in professional baseball and making a multitude of fantastic relationships along the way, Frank Coppenbarger shares great stories with weekly guests from various areas inside of the game. It's all here on the Fans First Sports Network. Let's get ready to play ball. Here's Frank Coppenbarger.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. And in the intro, it talks about all those relationships I made over the years, and this is just another one of the great ones. One of the all-time great guys that I had the pleasure of working with. I didn't work with him that long, but I'll tell you what, we've been friends ever since. The great Mike Lavalliere. Spanky, welcome to the show.
Well, Francis, it is my pleasure, as always. I love when we were able to get together and some great memories.
Absolutely, and we're going to try to talk about those, at least the ones that we're allowed to, here over the next few minutes. But nobody calls him Mike, but Spanky Lavalliere, Mike Lavalliere, was a former, longtime Major League Baseball catcher. Started out with the Phillies, played for them briefly, went over to the Cardinals, was with them parts of a couple of years, and then was involved in a trade, went to the Pirates, and that was, I'm sure he'll say, something he didn't really want to do at first, but it turned out to really be a great thing for him. And we'll talk to him about all his years with the Buccos, and he ended up with the Chicago White Sox, which I'm getting old. I forgot about that. So anyway, but fortunately, I can still read up on you a little bit. So you went to high school in New Hampshire. You weren't born there. You were born in Charlotte, right?
Yeah, that's correct. My dad was a minor league catcher, and he was playing for the Charlotte Hornets. And I was born in Charlotte, lived there about a month or two, and was raised in New Hampshire.
Okay. Were they from New Hampshire, your folks originally?
Yeah, my dad grew up in New Hampshire. My mom was a Southern Belle, grew up in the Knoxville, Tennessee area.
Oh, okay. All right. So anyway, growing up in New Hampshire, where they probably play about 8 games a year in the high school season.
Well, yeah, I tell you, they would schedule 18, and there was no chance. I don't think I ever played a full schedule. In fact, we had some games. Our ballpark was at the very top of the city, and it was cold. It was windy. We're playing one of our rivals, and this was like a public park. And the other team, in between innings, got on their school bus, and that was their dugout, so they could get warm. In the meantime, we were sitting on these park benches, just freezing our tails off.
Oh, man. Well, I can feel your pain because I'm still helping coach the Ocean City High School baseball team in New Jersey. And I swear, the windy city of Chicago and the old days of Candlestick Park, they don't have anything on Ocean City in our baseball field. The wind blows in right off the Atlantic Ocean, and it blows hard almost every day. And there's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't have 4 or 5 layers on at some point.
Well, the only thing I can say about that situation, hooray for the pitchers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So high school in New Hampshire, then you went to college at UMass Lowell, where you are a member of the school's Athletic Hall of Fame. Talk about your college experience a little bit.
Well, I tell you, Frankie, it was the first time that I played baseball in the fall. So I get there, late August, September, and there's a fall season. I had never, ever played past like the middle of August. And to have, 25 or 30 game schedule was brand new for me. And I actually thought that helped me mature as a ball player more than anything else. And yeah, as I said, good high school program, very good American Legion, Babe Ruth programs, but they all stopped, maybe playing 35, 40 games. Now this was an entire different season for me. And that's whenever I really felt that baseball became part of where I might have a chance.
Well, you mentioned American Legion baseball, and back when we grew up, that was a big deal. Not so much a big deal anymore. But a couple of weeks ago, Brian Snitker was on our show, and we talked about his time there playing American Legion ball. He and I grew up in the same town back in Decatur, Illinois, and he was a lot better player than me. But the Legion team, that was like the ultimate if you played Legion ball in the summer. Now it's still goes on, but it's not nearly as relevant.
I mean, just think about a small little town in Manchester, New Hampshire. On our Legion team, over the years when none of us got a chance to play together, but Mike Flanagan and Steve Balboni, myself, we all played for Sweeney Post, number 2 in Manchester, New Hampshire. And it was, pretty cool little thing to have.
That's really good. Very good. So anyway, college baseball, while you were in college, you played one year or maybe more in the Cape Cod League.
Yeah, part of 1 year. I was kind of devastated. Had a couple of phone calls prior to the draft, and I by no means was going to be a high draft pick. The tools weren't there. But I was asked by a couple of scouts, hey, you going to sign if we draft you? Absolutely. I was done with college. I wanted to try to play pro ball. And come the draft, nothing happened. So I went to the Cape, made the best of it, ended up having a really good 2-game series with a Philly scout there. And I signed at a nice little Chinese restaurant and celebrated with a Mai Tai bowl.
How about that?
Yeah.
So who was the scout that signed you?
His name was Dick Lawler. He was from Connecticut.
Yep, he signed a lot of guys too. He was a highly regarded scout in the Philly organization.
Well, and the thing is Dick had to kind of fudge my numbers a little bit because he asked me how tall I was. I said 5'7". He goes, they're not going to let me sign you at 5'7". You're 5'10". Okay.
There you go.
How much you weigh? About 210. Now you're 170. So a lot of my baseball cards show that I'm 5'10", 170. And that was just to get me signed.
That's good. That's good.
At no point was I ever 5'10", and 170 was probably back my sophomore year in high school.
I tell you what, they were always bringing him into Philly for, meetings to talk about players in the Northeast, big league players, minor league players, amateur players. Dick Lawler, highly regarded. I remember he took a chance on Ricky Batalico, who was a catcher, and ended up having a really nice career as a relief pitcher. And, he's one of the guys, he's the guy that signed him. So among many others.
Yeah, Dick was, I was playing third base and shortstop in the Cape Cod League. And so I signed as a third baseman. My first, I played for a month and a half in Spartanburg, which was low A. I come home, about a month or so later, Dick calls me and says, look, the Phillies going to invite you to spring training. That was a big deal because I was a free agent. And he goes, but you have to get a catcher's mitt. They're going to make you a catcher. I says, well, Dick, what if I don't want to catch? He goes, well, then you just keep your ass home. And I said, well, so I went and got a catcher's mitt.
I'll get the mitt.
Training, Rolly DeArmas and PJ Carey taught me how to catch. And I owe so much to all three of those guys.
Rolly DeArmas is still toiling away in the Philly organization. working with all the young players. He's highly regarded guy also. He has been with a number of the USA Olympic teams as a coach. Rolly was actually our bullpen coach the second half of 2008, and it was a good year for the Phillies. Won the World Series. He spent a couple years with the White Sox, back to the Philly organization, down in the low minors at the complex over in Clearwater, and he's there every day.
Yeah,
I think he opens the place up.
Yeah, I was thrilled to death because Rolly was our bullpen coach with the White Sox whenever I was there. And just to, be able to see your mentor, get to the big leagues, because everybody knew what a great guy he was. A baseball lifer that, he paid his dues. He was at the, rookie ball level forever, just mentoring all these young guys. And I was just so thrilled to death that I get a chance to spend time with him in the big leagues.
So when you were in the Cape Cod League, before we get to your signing, we've already talked about you signed, but before we get into your minor league career, when you were in the Cape Cod League, those guys have jobs in the daytime, right?
Yeah, I know.
What was your job?
They had two jobs. My one job is I had to go into this pizza place. It was called Tower Pizza, and they opened up for breakfast. And I had to go in at 5 o'clock in the morning and clean up from the night before and get everything ready for breakfast. And I'd work until about 10. And then at that point, if we had a home game, then I had to go and fix the field. So I was a breakfast order taker, cleanup guy at the restaurant, and grounds crew.
They fed you before you headed to the ballpark, though, right?
Of course. I mean, I didn't get this big by accident.
Well, that was a good job for you. You got a good breakfast, the most important meal of the day, and then you went over to the ballpark and finished up things there, and then you had a ball game.
Yeah, it was. I tell you, the Cape Cod League, and it was a very influential, revered amateur league throughout the country.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't thank them enough. Red Wilson was my head coach with the Yarmouth Dennis Red Sox. And, that whole organization, again, there's so many people that were involved helping me get to where I ended up. And every chance I get, I like to thank all of them.
Oh, absolutely. So you signed with the Phillies in July of '81. I want to ask you, you signed as a third baseman. Did you do any catching at all prior to your time with the Phillies?
I had a couple of fall, games in college. I maybe caught 2 games. Other than that, maybe when I was 8 or 9 years old. But I had never caught, for any amount of time, which ultimately to me was a huge advantage because whenever PJ and Rolly got me, I had no bad habits to break. So
kind of like going and taking golf lessons before you ever play. It's a lot easier that way.
Well, you know what? It was something that they molded me, and I was coachable, and it was just something that, I should have been a catcher from the get-go, but my knees probably appreciated, growing up as a shortstop, third baseman. I know my footwork, being able to handle the ball as much as I did as a shortstop, quick release, those all translated well to catching.
So the reason I asked you to elaborate a little bit, because you had mentioned your dad was a minor league catcher, and I thought maybe he would try to mold you to be a catcher when you started playing baseball.
No, it was pretty much just he kind of let me go. It just, it was something that, gosh, I remember I used to bawl my eyes out if we had a practice rained out, never mind a game. If we had a game rained out, I was so devastated, I don't think I left my room.
So now you're with the Phillies. You start out in the Philly organization. You work your way through the organization, and they convert you to a catcher. And in just a short time later, 2 years later, you're in the big leagues in September of '84, making your big league debut with the Phillies. What do you remember about that?
Well, it was in Montreal, and the Olympic Stadium didn't have the roof. And so this was like the coldest place on earth. It was all concrete. I mean, it was just no atmosphere. The fans, there wasn't a whole lot of fans were there at the time. Montreal wasn't very good. But I remember they had like a bullpen on the outside of the outfield fence in right field. And we had gone through 4 or 5 catchers. You know, we had Bo Diaz, Ozzie Virgil, Walken Fuss, Johnny Russell. Well, they either had pinch run or pinch hit for all of them. And they just finished pinch hitting for like the last guy. And I know the phone call down is going to be for me. And here comes the phone. And I'm going, no, I'm not ready yet. Yeah, but I have to be. So I remember Mike Ryan, Irish, you tell me, hey.
Another New Hampshire guy.
Yeah. And so, hey, get in there. And so I remember having to run from right field, go across their dugout into our dugout, which is about a 4-minute jog for me because I went very fast.
That's pretty far.
And then I get to the dugout, and Jerry Koosman is helping me put my gear on because I'm breathing too hard. So I get in the ball game, catching Larry Anderson. I didn't realize that every pitch he threw was a slider. So I just didn't even bother putting down fastball. We get out of an inning. I get an at bat, weak little ground ball, but we score a couple runs. We hold them. So I came in for the save. But
there you go.
You know, it was a thrill. And by the way, Montreal was the only place that we were able to pronounce my name the proper way.
Oh, yeah. Well, say it for us.
In French, it's Lavalliere. And
I was going to say, you sound just like a hockey player up there to me.
Well,
that PA announcer had to be so thrilled to be able to say that.
Yeah, you know, then I get to the vet, and I became Lavalliere, and it was just like, oh well, okay, and it was funny because down the bullpen, catching my good friend Shane Raleigh on a sideline, they let the fans in because he had a late sideline, whatever. A couple fans yelled down, "Hey, Lavalliere, Lavalliere!" And so I look up and wave. And they just say, just don't hesitate. Hey, you suck. You're a bullpen catcher. And so I look at Irish, and he goes, oh, don't worry. If they know your name, that means they love you. So,
oh, my goodness.
Welcome to Philly.
That's right. Did your family get a chance to see your debut up there in Montreal?
Nah, I had a couple friends that I grew up with and some high school friends, but everybody else was living outside of New Hampshire at the time. So, but there were a few friendly faces in the stands.
Well, I knew it couldn't be too far away, so I was thinking maybe there was a chance. So,
yeah, about 5 hours.
5 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Paul Owens was the manager that year.
Yeah, the Pope.
Pope.
Yeah, I got a great Pope story. So me and Rick Shue, we were buddies, AAA. We get called up together with Steve Jeltz. Our first road trip, St. Louis. So now we're at the Marriott right across the street.
Right.
We come out, coming back to the hotel. A little later, we're enjoying the big league life and getting that meal money. And so we go to walk into the bar. And we walk in, and there's the Pope and all the rest of the guys. the management, and we about face, and all of a sudden we hear a "Hey!" and I was like, "Oh shoot, we're in trouble now." And so, yes, Mr. Owens, what he goes, "Sit your asses down and drink you some beer." And I was like, "You mean we're not in trouble?" "No, sit down." Well, we had one beer and got out of there, but it was just like, it's one of those, don't go in the team bar if the manager's there.
Well, Paul Owens, he was a pretty frequent customer of that hotel bar. He made a lot of big deals in those hotel bars too.
I can imagine. That's. I am sure there's a lot of baseball deals that have been done. With everybody loosened up a little bit.
Oh yeah. Well, we're going to be back to talk some more about your long career in big league baseball right after this. All right, we're back with Spanky Lavalliere. Mike Lavalliere, longtime big league catcher. We just talked about his debut in the big leagues and his early time with the Philadelphia Phillies. So then I was very interested to read up on you a little bit. You and I met in St. Louis. I was working in the clubhouse. The Cardinals acquired you. Actually, it was a strange situation. I read that you were acquired in a conditional deal on December the 3rd of 84 and returned to the Phillies on the 13th of December. Now, I'm thinking to myself, in fact, yesterday I had a conversation with one of your old managers and one of my best pals, Bill Dancy. And I told Dance about this, and he couldn't recall it either. We think it must have been some way they were trying to manipulate the 40-man roster until they could get a spot for you or something like that.
Well, anyway. I was originally traded for Jeff Lottie.
Okay.
Well, on December 2nd, maybe, or 1st, I had arthroscopic knee surgery.
Oh, that's it. There's the reason.
I got to Philly. I had torn some meniscus. They drained it, shot it, say, "Hey, go get them." So they knew what was going on.
Okay.
But evidently, the medical folks and the folks that traded me weren't on the same page.
Oh.
So I get traded for Jeff Lottie. A couple days later, Suter signs with the Braves.
Right.
So they lose Suter and Lottie. Okay, that's two right-handers. Lottie was going to be their closer. Now they had just traded for him. So now the Cardinals say, "Oh no, damaged goods. We're sending them back."
Yeah.
So they could keep Lottie. When they traded me, they filled my spot on the 40-man. They could not offer me a big league contract, and I became a major league free agent. So I was entertaining some offers. St. Louis still wanted me, and ended up with Lee Thomas calling. I went to St. Louis. They made me a great offer. I knew they wanted me to start with. So that's how I ended up signing as a free agent with the Cardinals, even though it was a untrade.
Very strange set of circumstances, but by late January, you were a Cardinal.
Yeah, and that was, again, one of the probably big breaks for me, because with the Phillies, I was probably number 7, 8 on the depth chart. They had, Darren Dalton in front of me, Johnny Russell, Ozzie Virgil, Bo Diaz. I mean, they had a bunch of guys.
They were stacked up pretty good.
Yeah, and I started out that year in 84 going back to AA to play for Bill Dancy. And I was going to be the backup in AA again. That's how I started my year in 84, and ended up, guys got hurt, made it to Philly, and then found that the Cardinals, wanted me. Darryl Porter was, had 1 year left. And then I kind of just eased in and was able to make the St. Louis Big League Ball Club in 86.
Yeah. Well, you played a handful of games in 85, but primarily you were in Louisville that year. But by 86, you were the regular guy there. And talk about your time in St. Louis.
Well, I tell you one thing there. I didn't get a chance to play everywhere, but all the places that I played in, St. Louis was probably the very best fans around. They were very knowledgeable. They appreciated good play. Again, this is not to take away from other places, but St. Louis was they had such great backing of the St. Louis Cardinals baseball club. It was just, a dream to be a part of that organization.
Yeah.
They treated the players well. It was just a great experience.
I remember one of the first times when you were up with the Cardinals and we were in the clubhouse one morning, or late morning, I guess, or early afternoon. Back in those days, the players didn't come to the ballpark to eat like they do now. So I guess it was probably mid-afternoon. You came in and you caught a big fish that morning. And it was like the first time you ever went bass fishing. Now, Whitey Herzog, we should talk about this briefly. He had a lifetime friend, Herb and Helen Fox, that had a strip mine lake over on the Illinois side. And you could take the Cardinals team picture over there a lot of times. The guys all went over there. Whitey was over there. Lee Thomas and Whitey used to ride in a boat together, and that's how they got a lot of work done in the mornings while they were out there on the fishing pond. And you hauled in like a 10-pound bass the very first time you did it. I remember you talked about it in the clubhouse. I'm like, well, you might as well quit. You're never going to catch a bigger one and start playing golf or something else.
Yeah. I actually went out with Mike Heath, and he was kind of teaching me. And I thought I had snagged a log, and all of a sudden that log started moving, and then I had my hands full. And, sure enough, we get it up, and it's about maybe a pound or so off the Illinois state record. And
that's good.
You want to talk about beginner's luck. That was just beginner's luck. And boy, I tell you what, that year, you're absolutely right. It took me probably 30 more years before I caught anything as close to that.
Oh, yeah. That's
in Florida, where we have giant bass everywhere.
Right. Still hard to catch one that big.
Well, yeah, it's you can catch a bunch, but there's no guarantee, how big they are. And that was a great deal because Danny Cox ended up moving over close by there.
Still lives over there. Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of us. I remember how hot it was in the summer, and we'd wait for a full moon. And if we were home, we'd go out there after the game, fish by the moonlight, get home, and then take your nice little nap, and then go to the ballpark. It was just too hot during the day.
Absolutely. So a little over 2 years with the Cardinals. And then in April 1st, 1987, you probably thought they were pulling an April Fool's joke on you. You got Andy Van Slyke, and a highly regarded minor league pitcher by the name of Mike Dunn, who really would have been something if he wouldn't have got hurt, and a super guy to boot. The three of you guys were traded to the Pirates for Tony Pena. When they called you in and told you, did you think they were pulling your leg, or did you believe it?
See, we're getting ready. There was a big game that morning. Steve Lake caught all 9 innings. It was just Steve Lake and myself. They were the only catchers left in camp. So I was going to catch the A game at Al Lang. So Andy and I are out there. We're getting loose. And Dave Ricketts comes out, says, you're not playing. And I go, hey, Rick, who's catching? He goes, Laker. And I go, you know what, catching doubleheader, during the season's one thing.
Right, not spring training.
But catching a doubleheader in spring training, that something's up.
Right.
And so Andy and I are talking during the game. We know we're traded. And we're thinking, all right, where are we going? Nobody's telling us anything. And it's like, we're cast-offs at that point because everybody in the dugout knows that we're gone. And we decided, you know what? It's only two places we don't want to go. We don't want to go to Montreal because it's too cold and the fan support wasn't there, or Pittsburgh. So we go into Whitey's office after the game, get called in, and Dal Maxville's in there. And Maxie just said, hey, we just traded you to the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I was just like, right then and there, somebody just killed my pet snake. It was just, are you kidding me? This is going to be the first time I was going to be able to go back to the same place. And I already had an apartment. Jack Clark had gotten me a car deal. I'm living in the high cotton and, playing for great organizations.
Yeah.
And then they're shipping me to Pittsburgh, who just gone through their drug trials. They had lost over 100 games 3 years in a row. Hey, I don't know the manager. I don't know anybody on the team. And it was just like, this was crushing. And at the time, you're a professional. You got to be able to, do your job. And so it was kind of like, okay, whether you like it or not, there's just, it is what it is. So I show up, I got small feet. Nobody has my size shoes in black. So I've got my red Cardinal cleats. And our clubhouse manager that you know well, John Houlihan.
Yeah.
Hooley takes out a bucket of black house paint and takes a 4-inch brush and just brushes them all black. I couldn't even tie the shoelaces because they were too stuck together. I tied my shoelaces, have to wash my hands. I got black paint all over them. By the third inning, my shoes are already red again.
Really?
And that's how we kind of started it. And it was kind of cool, though. But, get into the locker room. Jim Leland comes right over. Hey, I'm Jim Leland. You were number 10 with the Phillies. You're number 10 with the Cardinals. You want number 10. And I go,
that was his number.
That's exactly. He's got it on. I go, I'm not going to take your number. He goes, no, you can have it. And I'm going, all right, is this a test? There's no chance I'm ever going to take the manager's number. So I ended up getting, number 4. They retired that during the season. So I went to number 12. But it was like, oh, come on now. And that's the kind of guy Jim Leland was, though.
Wow, you're right about that. And it's funny. I worked in the minor leagues in my hometown, Decatur, Illinois. We had a minor league team, the San Francisco Giants in the Midwest League back in the 60s and 70s. I would start out as a bat boy, then I worked in the clubhouse. That was my summer job for 8 years. So in 1972, there was a guy managing Clinton, Iowa, in the Detroit Tiger organization by the name of Jim Leland. And I got to know him pretty well, not only at the ballpark, but the hotel they stayed in. My mom and dad owned a small gift shop in the lobby of that hotel. So consequently, I was sitting around the lobby a good bit, waiting to go home after they closed up, and got to know a lot of people. But that's how long I've known Jim Leland. And he's a great guy. And now he's in the Hall of Fame. And primarily because of the great years you guys had in Pittsburgh, that got him started for sure. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But what sounded like a really bad deal in the beginning turned out to be really great. It was a great trade for both teams. Tony Pena goes to St. Louis. The Cardinals go to the World Series, which is the goal. But I'll tell you what, you were no slouch. You were the Gold Glove catcher in the National League. So you broke in with a bang over there, buddy.
Well, it was, it started off a little auspicious. We're playing the Cardinals opening series in Pittsburgh. Second game, Tudor started the first. I'm facing Coxie. We're buddies. And, it was weird being on the different side. But now I'm having to throw out the likes of Vince, and Ozzie and Terry, and Tommy Herr, and all the rabbits. And so right then and there, I was like, oh man, this stinks. Vince starts the game off with a walk. Bob Kipper's on the mound for us. No move. He twitches. There goes Vince. I catch the ball, and I getting ready to throw it, and Vince is pretty much already brushing himself off.
That's true.
I try to stop, and the ball comes out of my hand in this beautiful little soft loop, okay? It lands on the back of the mound and rolls and doesn't make it to second base. That was my first throw that year as a Pirate. As you can imagine, you heard the boo, we got you for Tony Pena. And ultimately, it was up from there, and I was fortunate I had a great staff and Leland and Ray Miller were outstanding with the running game.
Yeah.
You know, the Gold Glove I received it, but it was a total team effort.
Wow, that's really great. So you played for 2 Hall of Fame managers, Whitey Herzog. You can talk about him a little if you want.
Yeah, I tell you one thing, it's, Whitey, obviously huge reputation when I get there, and as a young guy, you just, you want them to know who you are, but you don't want them to pay too much attention to you. And so, he was tremendous to play for, but a lot of pressure. You wanted to, do well, obviously, but that this guy is a great baseball mind, and he's going to play his best team out there regardless. So I wanted to be part of that. And, I ended up, talking to him post-trade, about it. He says, look, I get sick and tired to have to run for your slow ass every 6th, 7th, or 8th inning. So that's why I traded you. So that's, but, I was like, it made sense.
Right.
And I didn't take it personal. Didn't feel slighted. It was just the circumstances is, I love where I was. I didn't want to go. I love playing for Whitey. All he wanted you to do is, bust your tail and do the best you could.
Well, your stay in Pittsburgh certainly worked out well. Worked out well for you, Andy Van Slyke, a multiple Gold Glove winner. Unfortunately, Mike Dunn got hurt, never really was able to reach the potential everybody knew he had. It's a shame because he would have been a dominant pitcher, I believe. So it was a good trade for both teams. I think it was a better trade for the Pirates because they had you guys for a long time, and you were a big part of their winning. So, in 90, 91, 92, you guys won the division. You were a heck of a ball club. Talk about some of the guys on that team.
Well, I mean, you look at our team, and our team had, no overpowering pitchers, but pitchers that could pitch. Dougie Drabeck, won the Cy Young in 90, a tremendous year. But we had guys that, Jim Leland knew how to get the best out of all of us. But we had talent. I mean, you look at an outfield of Bonds, Van Slyke, and Bonilla. I mean, that's just solid as can be. We had Jeff King at third, Steve Buechele at third. We had Jay Bell at short, Jose Lean at second. We had Sid Bream for a bit at first base, and so it was an exciting team to watch. We had power, we had a bunch of speed, but we played outstanding defense. Our pitchers threw the ball over the plate and took advantage of that defense. And like I said, Jim Leland used all of us to not only help ourselves out, but get the most out of us that ended up helping out the ball club. And that's why I think he was one of the greatest.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. And he ended up getting his just due, elected to the Hall of Fame a couple years back, and certainly deserves to be there. Fiery manager too. I used to love to watch him argue with umpires. He was terrific.
Frank, the best is what nobody gets to see, and that's the chewing out sessions after a game. And Leland was the absolute best at it. The one time we had just gotten Kirk Gibson, just to try to, give us a little more pop, a little more depth, and we were playing lousy. And we get the old don't get dressed. And Leland, he comes out of his office yelling, screaming, and he never looked at anybody, but he walked around the locker room. And then in Pittsburgh, there was a little area where the bathrooms were and the batting cage and the shower. And he'd go all the way out there, scream and yell. And then he'd go to his office and slam the door.
Yeah.
Well, Gibby, decides he's going to get undressed. I go, no. He's not done yet. He goes, what? Here comes Leland out about a minute later, more ranting, just screaming as loud as he can. And he's talking about, some of us that he couldn't get a dozen used baseballs and a couple of broken bats for. Okay. And so he goes back into the office and slams the door. Gibby looks at me and go, now he's got one more. He's got one more. Out he comes, and then he lets it go, and I think he runs out of stuff. And then he goes back in, and then it's like, okay, we're good. And so we all
go home.
We took our verbal beating, and it was like, you know what? He cared, and he wanted the best for us, and he was respected. But some of us guys that played for him for a little bit, we kind of knew his gig, and some of it was motivation, and some of it was just inner fire, and
right.
You appreciated it.
You speaking of that argument, when he talked to your ball club after the game, talk is probably a weak word for that. When he yelled at you guys, I got two stories, and one reminds me of him when he was managing in Detroit, and he got into it with the umpire at home plate. Started playing God Bless America in the 7th inning. So he stopped, put his hand over his heart, and the umpire had his hand over his heart. As soon as the last note of the song was over, he picked right up where he left off and started airing out the umpire again.
That's beautiful.
And the second story is one you don't know, and we're going over time, but I know our producer Brian Davis won't mind because he's a huge Pirate fan. So this is all music to his ears. But the second one, I was working in the clubhouse for the Cardinals AAA team in Springfield, Illinois, in the American Association. Jim Leland was managing the Tigers AAA team in Evansville. Kirk Gibson, who you mentioned, was on that ball club. And we had a tiny little clubhouse in Springfield, but I had this magazine rack that some store gave me or something, and I had it propped up like on the end of a locker. And you went from the clubhouse area into like the shower and bathroom area, and I had all these magazines in there. And he came in there one night, I'm kind of standing out of the way, and he starts unloading on that Evansville team. He was very upset, and he's pacing back and forth. And the next thing you know, he kicks that magazine rack. It was like a wire rack that was spring-loaded. So if you pulled out a magazine, all the magazines wouldn't fall. It just collapsed. So he kicked that, and he used to wear spikes. And his spikes caught in the magazine rack. It tackled him, and all the magazines fell on top of him, and even he started laughing. I'll never forget that. It's a classic.
I just one more if we can.
Yeah, we got time.
Okay, so we're in San Francisco, and we get swept by the Giants, and we got a good club. And Harvey, how's your knee? Is out
clubhouse
there.
Manager.
Yeah, the last day was his best, and it was enchiladas.
The Mexican
tacos.
Food.
Yeah,
Guillermo.
that was the best spread he had.
Yeah.
And we're going back to Pittsburgh. Well, he comes in and dumps the spread.
Oh.
I mean, oh my God. And you want to talk about a bunch of guys that are just, we're more upset. We're going to have to eat U.S. Air belly bombs on the way home, right? And so he gets done, right? Jose leaned, goes down by the floor, grabs a little bit, bites it, and goes, "Hey guys, it's still good."
Well, I remember those burritos were wrapped in foil. Maybe some of those survived the fall.
Yeah, Jimmy was a spread killer. It was a little bit humorous at times, even though you couldn't laugh. But one of his temper tantrums, he kicked the spit cup, hit me on the side of the head, and it's dripping down the side of my face. And I just buried my head in my lap, and I'm laughing so hard. And Leland stops, and he goes in his office because I know, like, he's going to be laughing. So afterwards, the next day, he goes, "You jackass, what are you doing?" I go, "That was funny. I mean, that was funny." He goes, "I know, but I was doing pretty good until then." Those are the things that,
oh, yeah.
You know what, it's almost a bonding thing for your team to get your butt chewed, and then, you take it, you make yourselves better. You don't want that to happen anymore. So, it was always a motivational thing, even though a couple of times I ended up kind of comical.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to bring up a sore subject, but I'm gonna get the answer from you. The guy that was closest to the whole thing, and you mentioned this guy, he was a former teammate, Sid Bream. The playoffs in '92, they end with a play at the plate, and he's trying to score, and he wasn't a fast runner, trying to score in a single. And you tag him, and it was bang, bang. Was he out or safe?
All right. So, Sid is a great guy, and he lives in Pittsburgh. He's a very good Christian man. But I had to tell him a few years ago, "Hey, Sid, you've been living a lie. You are out. Come on, just fess up." And I actually thought that I got his back leg.
Yeah.
That leg slid in home plate. When you're sliding to second or third, no problem because the base is above ground. Home plate's level. If you try to dig your spike in, you're going to break your ankle.
Right.
So it was bang, bang. Later on, I was doing some work for ESPN. I had some guys take a look at it. Our technical guys. They ran it. They only had 2 views. And they go, with those 2 views, inconclusive.
Yeah.
But I still maintain, and I sign every picture of the slide with "he was out."
I love it. I love it. Well, it was an exciting ending. Obviously, it didn't go your guys' way that night, but it was one of the most exciting conclusions to a baseball game that I can remember. So in '93, early '93, the Pirates let you go. You signed with the White Sox, got back in the playoffs, won the American League West, and the Orioles beat you in the playoffs that year, right?
Actually, that Baltimore? Blue Jays.
Blue Jays in '93. Okay, I got the years wrong with the Orioles being in there. That's my mistake.
Yeah.
Toronto.
But they end up winning everything.
And, I'm aware of that because I was with the Phillies by then.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You know what? We had a great club with Chicago. Yeah. We had everything. Same thing, speed. We had probably more power. I thought pitching-wise, we're a little bit stronger. You know what? The Blue Jays, kind of a team of destiny. They pitched extremely well against us. They get some big hits. It was just, one of those things. And it was the 4th year in a row that I was on a team that got beat in the playoffs. And so I never did get a chance to see the World Series, but at least got a chance to have a chance. And it's something you look back. Some guys never get that chance. I was fortunate enough to be in that situation.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you had a marvelous career and a lot of fun all along the road and a lot of great teammates. And we've already gone way over time here today, but I could talk to you all day long. We'll continue this at El Cap at some point this spring. And I really appreciate you being on with us today, Spanky. Thanks so much.
Francis Ford Coppenbarger, it's always a pleasure. I love seeing friends, and it's just the game lives within us, and it's something that I think all of us can say, how privileged we were to share the time together.
Absolutely. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon. All right, buddy?
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, folks, please like, follow, and subscribe to the Fans First Sports Network, and we'll be back next week with another exciting guest.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks with Frank Coppenbarger. Tune in next week for another great episode on the Fans First Sports Network.